Hey, I'm Dr. Kirk Jefferson, and I welcome you tonight to this event where we are looking at blockchain technology and cybersecurity. I am a 33-year higher education veteran. I currently serve as a dean of graduate education over several graduate programs at a small private university in Louisville, Kentucky, Spalding University. My area of expertise is political science, international relations, European politics, and have been involved in academics and global education for many years, traveled to many countries. And my colleague, David McDermott, who I want to introduce to you, and I traveled in 2013 to China and Mongolia. David is a global business analyst, has worked in global business and sales and many other areas in his career. Also a graduate of Westminster College, where David was my student. And now we're collaborating on this exciting venture of trying to bring to you some important information that I think you'll find useful in the area of cybersecurity and blockchain technology. David, great to be with you tonight.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Kurt. Appreciate it. No, he's right. We did go to China together. It was quite the wild time. So tonight, what I want to talk to you guys about is Dogecoin. Okay. And Dogecoin is just snowballing into such a cultural phenomenon. It seems like everywhere we go, we're talking about Dogecoin or cryptocurrencies. There was a huge bull run last week where almost every cryptocurrency increased exponentially. It's been fun to watch. So Doge specifically, right, was originally designed to mock cryptocurrency. And it was only until 2021 that it really saw its rise. And it's went up all the way from basically 0.2 of a cent all the way to 42 cents. You know, brands are accepting it as payments. Exchanges are starting to list it. The memes of Doge are just spreading like wildfire. The media is talking about it like crazy. And I guarantee you have a friend that's kind of pestering you about Dogecoin. So let's talk about it, right? So how does Doge work? What's the hype around Dogecoin? Is it warranted? And let's talk about the fundamentals. And before we get started, though, I feel like I need to disclose that I do personally own Dogecoin, and I am not a financial advisor. And this lesson today is just strictly educational, and it's not financial advice. I just want to make that clear off the get-go. So quick history. Originally made by Billy Marcus and Jackson Palmer, right? They just wanted to create something that was fun, free from banking fees, and instantaneously. They made it originally to mock crypto, and its first original purpose was to upvote people on forum pages. If you like something that, you know, the content they created or something that they said, you would tip in Dogecoin. This Billy guy, by the way, I believe he was a software engineer for IBM, and Jackson worked for Adobe. It was created from a Litecoin fork. So Litecoin is a generation 1 blockchain that we'll talk a little bit later, but basically it just cloned it, moved over, and rebranded it as Doge. It does have faster block time, so the transactions are a little bit faster on it. And the main thing about Dogecoin that everybody knows is the Shiba, the Doge meme, right? That became really popular in 2013. So quick timeline, right? So December 6th to 2013 is whenever it was launched. And it wasn't even a full, month later whenever the first hack occurred. And it was with Doge Wallet. And what had happened was a hacker got into the system files and rerouted every single coin that was going in or out of a Doge wallet into a static address. And this was pretty big news at the time. It trended on Twitter, and for a long time, Dogecoin was the #1 tweeted cryptocurrency in 2013, even though it was a negative event. No publicity is bad publicity, right? But the thing that trended was save the Dogemas. And basically what happened was the community came together and rallied, figured out what wallets had crypto stolen from it. And from there, they were able to get a community fund. So everyone volunteered their own money and their own funds to replace the Doge that were stolen. So that was kind of an incredible thing that happened. Moving on, Doge passed all other crypto combined in terms of volume in 2014, which is another huge milestone. 17, 18, there was a big crypto bubble, and Doge peaked at basically 1.7 cents, which is still relatively nothing, right? Penny stock valuation. Then July 2020, things kind of started changing a little bit whenever, TikTok with the trends kind of jumped in and caused a brief price spike. I believe it only got up to 9 cents though. And then, the big thing happened in January, right around the same time as GME, when Elon Musk and Reddit and everyone's kind of coalescing together. We saw an 800% rise of the price of Dogecoin in 24 hours, which is incredible. And then in February, it went to an all-time high of 8 cents. And that was spurred on by Mark Cuban, Snoop Dogg, Elon Musk, obviously. Everyone, Elon Musk is so involved with everything Doge does, and Gene Simmons. So let's talk about that for a second, right? The fact that it went from basically less than a cent or 0.7 cents, and then it went all the way up to 10 cents. I mean, how awesome is it that you can look at a chart like this? That's a one-day chart, by the way. So that valuation is meteoric. And then how even crazier is it that only 3 days later, you look at the same chart, right? And it's at 42 cents. I mean, this is absolutely crazy what we're talking about here. This is stuff that every investor likes to see. Whenever we talk about market cap, I mean, Doge right now has the 7th largest market cap. In a week earlier, whenever we hit that 42 cents, it went all the way up to $70 billion, which is just mind-boggling. If Doge were to hit $9 per Dogecoin, I mean, that would be the complete Bitcoin market cap. I mean, Doge would be worth more than what Bitcoin's worth, which is just impossible to conceive. So looking at this though, right, if Doge were to conceivably hit $1, it would have $129 billion market cap, which is roughly the same as Starbucks. So the question you have to ask, how sustainable is that, right? So like, where can we even spend Dogecoin? If we have a Dogecoin that has no utility, but has the same valuation of Starbucks, what's the future look like for that? And so people ask me all the time, right? Do you think Doge is going to crash? Do you think it's actually going to hit $1? Like, what do you think the long-term viability is? And again, I'm not a financial advisor, but hopefully I can provide you guys with a framework and a basic understanding of how Doge works, and then you guys can draw your own conclusions. But basically, there's 3 things we need to talk about: Doge on a blockchain and how it affects supply, Doge's utility, meaning how you can spend it, and then what is the secret driving force behind Doge? What makes Doge so much more special than any other cryptocurrency whenever we're looking at it? Because, looking at this Cardano and Polkadot, I mean, they have everyday uses. They have everyday values to a lot of different companies. So it's interesting that we have Doge coming up. So let's talk a little bit about the blockchain, right? I told you before it was a hard fork of Litecoin. So basically Litecoin is a Gen 1 blockchain. There's nothing really too special about it. So the original Bitcoin, right, blockchain, Litecoin basically copied that, and Doge copied the Litecoin. So Doge is really a copy of a copy. The only real difference is Dogecoin's transaction time is a little bit faster. So what does that look like, right? What is the consensus mechanism? How does the blockchain actually work? It's a proof of work system, right? So there's blocks, miners, and nodes. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but over here all the way on the right, you have these transactions going into this block, okay? Whenever the transactions are filled in the block, they move over to these miners, which are basically superpowered computers that use really complicated algorithms to verify the transactions are correct. Whenever the transactions are validated and deemed to be correct, they're awarded a certain amount of coins or tokens, right, as a reward for performing these functions. And then afterwards, it's added to the overall blockchain where it's solidified. So if we're to look at this, what is the block reward? It's 10,000 Doge. So for every block that is mined, somebody is getting 10,000 Doge coins. And what does the transaction time look like? It can basically process 33 of these transactions per second. And the supply, so is there a limit to how many Doge coins can be in existence? No, there is no limit. It's an infinite supply. And so let's move on, right? Let's look at supply. So when I think of currency, it either needs to be a solid SOV, which is a store of value, or a MOE, right? And so for Dogecoin, if we're looking at the supply, right now, today, there is 129 billion Dogecoins available. And for Bitcoin, just for a juxtaposition, there's only 18.3 million Bitcoins available. So what's the max cap? How many can you possibly have? it's limitless for Doge. For Bitcoin, it's going to max out at 21 million. So this is why some people say that Bitcoin is like digital gold, right? Because there's only so much that you can possibly mine and get from it. What is the reward for mining this block? It's 10,000 Doge coins essentially per minute. And for the blockchain, right, Bitcoin, the block reward is 6.5 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. And that reward actually gets halved, right? So about every 4 years, the algorithm that helps run Bitcoin, it takes the reward and cuts it in half. So it makes it more difficult essentially to get a larger supply strictly from mining. Dogecoin doesn't have anything like this. It's going to be 10,000 and it's going to stay that way for a very long time. So whenever I look at this, right, the first initial thing I think of is, oh my God, well, what about inflation, right? So with Bitcoin's current supply, right, it would take so it gets 10,000 coins minted per minute. That means there's 14 million coins added per day. Sorry, I had to do the math real quick. That means 1 billion coins are added every 80 days. If Doge really were to hit $1, that means you would have to put $1 billion every 80 days to maintain, that $1 status. And that means Doge mints more coins than Bitcoins every 2 days in Bitcoin's existence, right? Bitcoin's only going to get 21 million coins, period. So every 2 days, Dogecoin is minting more than all of Bitcoin's total supply. And so, like I said, in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, inflation. So if you go with a more traditional economic theory on inflation, yeah, I mean, that would be a big concern. But if you subscribe to, the modern monetary theory where maybe inflation isn't as much of a concern, well, then you can maybe see how Doge has potential there. Another big problem area with Dogecoin, I perceive, is it's consolidated, right? It's not equal distribution of the coins. You see the top 1% of Doge addresses collectively hold 94.2% of the total supply. And that is a crazy figure. And then the graph on the left, Elon Musk is constantly saying, hey, I can't endorse Doge unless, we get some of these big whales out of the way, unless we get some of these big institutional players to start selling, because we need to sell Dogecoin in order to make it more viable as a currency. And so when we look at this, the top 100 largest Doge addresses hold 68.1% of total supply. That is really crazy. I mean, that's wild. And we're going to take a field trip real quick. We're going to look at Dogecoin's blockchain. I'm just going to drag it on the screen real quick. There's something I want to show you here that's really, really important. So this is Dogecoin's blockchain, right? So this is the top 100 wallets, which is that figure I just showed you. Look at this one, the number 1% of coins. It says 28.42%. That means that there is one wallet, and nobody really knows whose wallet this is, that contains more than a quarter of all Doge coins available. I mean, what is that going to do to the Doge price if they just dump it all at once? And, it gets even more crazy when you actually look at the transactions that this person is doing, right? So whenever we come here, this is how many Doge they're actually purchasing. And I am not sure if you can actually see the price. It's actually kind of small even on my screen over here. But most of them are 1 cent, 57 cents, 75 cents. They're buying 4 Doge at a time. They're buying 2 Doge at a time. It's really crazy. But whenever we go down super far, right? If we go down to January and February where Doge was hitting its highest peaks, we see some crazy numbers start happening. I mean, now all of a sudden they're buying, basically 1 billion Doge at a time. So that's 1 billion Doge. This is 100 million Doge. This is 735 million Doge. Here they sold 1 billion Doge. So these numbers are incredible. And so we can look at this, right, because it's a blockchain and everything is, publicly viewable on a blockchain. We don't know whose this is, but Elon Musk, a lot of other people are saying that this wallet is probably Robinhood. And so this is probably Robinhood. And so the thing about Robinhood too is whenever you buy Dogecoin on Robinhood, you don't actually own it, right? Those coins aren't sent to your personal crypto wallet. You're just buying a security basically for Dogecoin. And so that's how I think people are classifying this huge wallet. They think that it's Robinhood's wallet. So who is controlling it is big, right? Transaction speeds. This is absolutely huge. So if a currency isn't going to be a store of value, it needs to be a medium of exchange, meaning like a dollar, right? I can go up to the store and just give you $1 and you can give me a pack of bubble gum or whatever it is. So it's really important, right, that we can be able to use and spend this. Whenever we talk about transaction speeds, right, Bitcoin can do about 7 transactions per second. It's extremely slow. In fact, it's probably the slowest blockchain in existence. Dogecoin can do about 33 transactions per second. Now, Ripple here is a Gen 3 blockchain that's designed specifically for finance, and it does 1,700 transactions per second. To juxtapose that, PayPal does about 191 transactions per second. But if we go to the big players, right, Visa, I mean, at any given point in time, they can do up to 24,000 transactions per second. So you can see where Doge potentially has a huge issue when it comes to transaction speeds. You don't want to be at Walmart trying to buy an item and have to stand there for 15, 20 minutes for that transaction to go through so you can leave the store. And if we really want to get technical, Amazon's cloud can go 500 to 1 million transactions per second. Again, that's working with AWS, and Bezos is a huge believer in not having restrictions for proliferating your technology, right? So he thinks like the higher, the faster the rates, the better everything's going to be. Innovation will not be stifled. And so that's why we're seeing such crazy numbers. Are they necessary? I don't necessarily know if they're necessary, but it's what he's got. So now let's talk about spending it, right? So the ultimate test of a currency, the medium of exchange, is spending it. Where can I spend Doge? I already told you can't spend it on Robinhood. All Robinhood does is sell you a security, basically saying, oh, you own X amount of Doge coins. There is growing adoption, right, with visibility. So there's this website here that I'll take you to again real fast, guys. It's got 1,200 companies that accept Dogecoin. I will say most of these companies also accept a lot of other, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, XRP, Monero, things like that. Whenever we're looking at this, though, this one's actually pretty cool. Bitcoin postage. So the United States Postal Service is actually partnering with this company, so you can buy stamps and stuff. That is pretty cool. But a lot of these are video games, gambling services. A couple of them are tourism orientated. When I look at this list, it's really nothing that I think to myself, wow, I can see myself using this every day. But I do want to note that it is a growing list. So the Mavericks, right? Mark Cuban, he's so big on Doge, and he basically has said any Maverick gear, the Maverick store or whatever, we want to support that. And so he tweets about it all the time. Snickers bar. So they're not like explicitly accepting it, but this is definitely an endorsement, right? This goes hugely with visibility, which is important for acceptability later down the line. And then you have Newegg, which is absolutely huge. It's a big tech company. If you've ever built a computer, you've probably worked with Newegg before. And so them accepting Dogecoin, good PR move on them, big for Dogecoin, big win. Something I think is interesting, you see Elon Musk championing this Dogecoin an awful lot, right? And he made news earlier in the year when he said, hey, if you want to buy a Tesla and you live in the United States, you can buy it with Bitcoin. Well, this is just a thought I have in my head, right? If we can buy it with Bitcoin, and Elon Musk is such a big proponent of Dogecoin, how come he also did not accept Dogecoin as payment for Teslas along with Bitcoin? It seems to me like that would be a parallel move. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So there's something in this presentation, right, that you guys may have noticed as we went along with it, right? And that's what's going to lead me to the secret final driving force behind Doge. And maybe you've caught on to it, but basically it's all these memes, the power of memes. This is what the secret is to Doge, right? It's not the utility. It's not that it's a great store of value or a medium of exchange. It's that it has this hype behind it, right? And so let's talk about memes for a second. At their core, memes are a shared idea. They're decentralized inside jokes. Memes can mutate, evolve, adapt, just like a virus, right? And they blend in with other memes and appropriate other trends. They can be visual, idea-based, verbal, physical. When it comes to visual, that could be like a picture, right? Like everyone has seen this smoking Elon Musk. When it comes to an idea, that's like Doge to the moon, right? Doge to the moon, Doge to the moon, GME to the moon. When it comes to physical, verbal. D's out for Harambe, or, it could be political, like stop the steal. Physical, I mean, I guess what was it, 2016, when literally everyone was doing the dab. Memes can also lose and gain value in social marketplaces, right? So in order to be cool from 2016 to 18, basically, you had to be dabbing. You had to do it. It was all over social media. Every kid under 18 was like dabbing, and you made big waves if you were dabbing. But now, I mean, nobody does it, right? So they lose or gain value in social marketplaces, and they also throw out conventional rules, right? So in a quote by Elon Musk, I think this was a Clubhouse discussion that he had. He says, memes are a complex form of communication. A picture says 1,000 words, and maybe a meme says 10,000 words. It's a complex picture with a whole bunch of meaning to it. So basically, you can just look at it, get a meaning, and form an opinion on it, right? Which is maybe good or maybe it's bad. So using the internet, memes can infiltrate our minds, right? Where they have considerable influence over our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors. Like I said, instead of reading a news article, you just get the headline with a meme and basically form an opinion. Memes allow us to play cognitive defense, acting as a shield against perceived vulnerabilities, deflecting negativity to solicit goodwill with other people and other communities. They dismiss skeptics and detractors with the armor of humor. So basically, people are putting on masks and not, like being true to themselves. And most importantly, it can weaponize social media, and it does. And so, like, we can think of this in political memes, where you get a picture of AOC where her eyes are bugging out, and there's a quote on it that is either completely false, completely misquoted, or straight up lying. And that goes on both sides. There's no left or right here. But it's interesting to me that those things have been so adopted so quickly. You can't go on Facebook without running into these things, right? Memes, whether we like it or not, are ingrained in our society, and they slip past our cognitive biases super quick and super easy. And I think that's how they drive societal change so well, right? And so that's how you get people like Elon Musk and Mark Cuban, who have such a large influence over these kind of things, right? Because memes, they feed on collective self-expression, and they wield, art and humor and creativity, and they basically feed on the hive mind. And it's what is driving the hype train. And so, like I said, Elon Musk and Mark Cuban, they're the conductors of this hype train for sure. So let's talk about memes in the future of Doge. The average lifespan of a meme is only about 4 months old. It's usually pretty quick. Doge is over 7 years old, though. So it came about in 2013. So December this year, I guess it'll be 8 years old. And so why is this thing, allowed to persist so, vehemently? And I think it's because of the Lindy effect, right? Originally proposed by Albert Goldman in 1964, but I think it was popularized by Nicholas Taleb. It basically says the older an idea or a technology, the same will be its life expectancy. So the more you're exposed to something, right, and the longer it's been in play, the more likely it is to stay in play. More likelier it is to be there. It's just like buying jeans. Levi jeans have been around for absolutely forever. I mean, would you rather buy a no-name brand of jeans, if assuming everything's equal, right? Money, price, everything. Would you rather buy a no-name price of jeans, or would you rather buy Levi jeans? So this Lindy effect is quite interesting, and I think is a big proponent of why Dogecoin has remained so relevant over the years, even though it's remained such a relatively obscure coin up until recently. And so the question is, will Dogecoin retain its value? So Dogecoin as a currency, how it's produced now, how it's circulated, its utility, and what basically drives its hype machine. Dogecoin is still not being traded on Coinbase, Gemini, PayPal, Venmo, Amazon, any of these big things. And some people take that as a sign of, hey, this is bad, this isn't good, they're never going to be on these things. And then some people are like, this is amazing. You're getting in on Doge early. You're going to get Doge at a really, really good price, because eventually these will be, satiated. And I think in order for that to actually happen, I think the hype cycle that we're seeing around Doge right now has to last long enough for these companies to see long-term value in it, right? So much like the Lindy effect, I bet you could probably even chart it where the obscure value of Dogecoin for these companies is going this way, right? And then the hype is going this way. Eventually, the hype is going to peak off and maybe die out, and Doge will lose a lot of its value. But if it does that after it's crossed that point where all these other companies deem that Doge is, hey, a viable currency and we want to support it, I mean, Doge will last forever if that's to be the case. But when it comes to the hype cycle, it can't and it won't rest solely on people like Elon Musk or Mark Cuban. His social capital can only go so far. We need to break into the more mainstream, right? And the current bull trends have done an amazing job of that to bolster a more robust community within Dogecoin. But is it enough to attract long-term institutions to buy in? I guess only time will tell. That's all I got for you guys for Dogecoin today. Kurt, did you want to go, or did we want to do questions or anything? Oh, you are muted. Oh.
I think I'm unmuted. Hey, thank you, David. I was going to say a couple things there and get your take on something before I move into.
Yeah, let's do it.
Before I move into cybersecurity a little bit and cybersecurity kind of behaviors tied into some of this, but I loved it. I think your presentation is really provocative. It's informative. And I'm thinking about a few things. Just as you and I have talked in our research and our discussions on this topic, especially Gen 1 in terms of crypto and how that ties to the blockchain, just the economics of it all, it really is fascinating to me because you're going kind of, when you study this and you start to learn about it and apply it and even invest in it, it really is fascinating because you're getting back to kind of some real basics of economics in terms of trying to link value to what it actually, the product itself, the currency itself. And I think that for me is fascinating because it's almost, I think more monetarily, so I'm thinking through what the value of a cryptocurrency actually is. But watching all of this take place, and then your last point I thought was really fascinating about memes, that my mind was going a couple directions. First of all, when I think of memes, I think of a lot of different things. But especially in the West, but I would even say the United States and Britain, I'm thinking more the Anglo-Saxon democracies, humor and wry's sense of humor is kind of a staple of our culture. In a lot of cultures, humor may not play out exactly like it does in the cultures that are building these kind of tools, economic tools. And so I wonder, David, if would a meme of Dogecoin play well in an Arab culture or the Indian culture, South Asia, versus, say, the American culture, where we make fun of just about everything, including things that are seen as sacred and whatnot. I'm curious to what your thought is about that, and then I'll come back and maybe ask you a couple more questions or make some more comments.
So I think the thing you're highlighting is moving from a hard value system, an asset-based system, where our money is backed by gold or by, a government or something like that, to something more akin to social capital, right? And this is a space like even China's, exploring right now with their social scoring system and things like that. But it is interesting that you bring up the cultural differences because I would imagine that a meme coin, it would be possible to do in something like Iran, I think is what you said, correct? Because the things that they value and joke about are probably not the same things we do, but they're still equal in proportion, right? It's like if somebody breaks their leg or someone gets stabbed in the arm. Both of those things, right, independent of each other, are probably the worst pain anyone has ever felt at that particular moment in time. The same way that this humor and this humor is on the same level, I think something like that could proliferate in that area. But if we're talking about blockchains and cryptos outside of the meme area, I definitely do see value in things like that in those countries as well. It provides a good, stable source of income, I think, whenever you're processing those blocks on the blockchain, whenever you can get a type of crypto that has more of a store of value based feature like Bitcoin or Ethereum versus, a meme coin. Oh, did you mute yourself again?
Yeah, sorry about that. We'll get this down as we move through it. No, I think you give a really interesting, well thought out response there. And I had another comment I wanted to make that was related, but it's kind of fleeting. I do think that the meme discussion is interesting, and this gets into the other thing that we've talked a lot. You know how I feel. I'm a student of democratization, comparative politics, and democracy. And one of the things I like about this whole Bitcoin, crypto, Dogecoin, all the potential for these kind of things to go onto a blockchain is the idea that people could eventually start to see income, find ways to be creative with their own income, etc. And it gives more people theoretically a little more access and even power, if you will. The other thing is, and you may not agree with that comment, but the other thing that I find interesting about this too is when you're talking about Mark Cuban and Elon Musk and others, I'm thinking about this from kind of the a little more critical side of critiquing capitalism, that one might be cynical and say, and this is what I want to get your take on, David, on this, is cynical and say, well, you've got billionaires playing around with this, investing in it, the people who are involved with Robinhood and this kind of stuff, the financial traders.
You want to get super real cynical here. Elon Musk, I brought up the point, right, that he said he did not, he's not accepting Dogecoin for Tesla. And I could be wrong on that. I don't believe I am. Mark Cuban says he has the most amount of transactions with Dogecoin going through the Maverick store basically right now. I don't think it unconceivable, right? How did they actually accrue these Dogecoins that they're so, happy about, right? And why isn't exactly Elon Musk accepting Dogecoin? So remember how we talk about blockchains, right? The proof of work consensus. How do you generate the supply? You do it by mining. And so that's very unique to a blockchain, right? That you can just get a computer and mine this. And who has access to the best technology in the world, a la Tony Stark style? It's these people, right? So it's possible, if I'm being cynical, that these guys have the most ultimate, setup when it comes to mining these cryptocurrencies, and they're hoarding all this Doge, and they're using their social capital proliferated through these memes in order to boost the price up to the point in which that they are going to sell. Because if you remember back about the wallets, how the top 100 wallets have 68.7% of all the currency. It's not inconceivable to believe that it's these people that are mining it and hoarding it and are eventually gonna dump it all at some point to proliferate their wealth.
So I think that's kind of the point, the direction I was going is,
yeah,
Elon Musk could probably buy all this up 3, 4, 5 times over and, not have any issues. But he may be allowing, or Mark Cuban or Bill Gates might be allowing those of us who've invested in some of these tools to have a little bit of fun, a little bit of hope, et cetera, in this process. But one could argue, I mean, this is not a new phenomenon, right? I mean, you have the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts and others when you start to look at the nature of transnational capital. And I find this, however, that your discussion, which you focus mainly tonight on Dogecoin, which I appreciate it because I honestly don't know a whole lot. And I was going to even ask you an even more basic question. What's the little animal on the Dogecoin? Is that a fox? Is that a bear? What is that exactly?
The 2000
Dog. Okay, my bad.
Doge, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Looks like my little Maltese, who's probably 15 pounds overweight, but I'll leave it at that. Anyhow, cute little dog, but basically, yeah, no, I think it is an interesting exercise, and I do think your point about the memes are really good. My favorite memes, by the way, are the ones with Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder, which are uber cynical, and they can be used for different political vantage points and everything else, but they're always a lot of fun. Well, David, do you want me to go ahead and shift gears a little bit and go into cybersecurity for a few minutes, and then we can wrap it up? I know we're in good shape time-wise, and we can come back and wrap up by maybe recapitulating some of the main points from what you were telling us about cryptocurrency and the first generation. But I was going to talk a little bit tonight, and I'll try not to belabor it. As David knows, and I mentioned, I'm a professor of many, many years in higher education, 33 years at 5 universities. And about 4 years ago, I moved my family to Louisville, Kentucky. I'd been in Missouri for nearly 30 years, just around 30 years, and grew up in Illinois and have ties to a university community there where I was born and raised. But, the whole idea of cybersecurity is kind of a new concept to me. Now, I gave a talk about 20 years ago on cybersecurity and records management to the American Records Management Association meeting. And I remember at the time when I gave that talk, it was in front of probably 50 or 60 in Missouri. It was a regional group, but we had people from all over the state. And I remember people being blown away by the thought of their physical files, which most of them were operating with physical files. I remember one press, for example, and I mean book press in that state, had warehouses full of files, and that's all digital now. And just talking about cyber attacks during recent conflicts, one was the Serb-American or the Kosovar War with the Yugoslavs back when Yugoslavia was an entity. It broke up, of course. And I remember talking with this group about the nature of cyber attacks. And even though I am not an IT person or an expert in cybersecurity, I did a little research and started to realize that this is what was coming down the pipeline. And unfortunately, Americans historically were not, in government, especially the area that I taught about, were not super, aside from the NSA, the National Security Agency, were not necessarily, and a few other agencies, a lot of them were not necessarily ready. We did not have a Supreme Court justice till 2010 who used email in this country. Elena Kagan, who's an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, was the first Supreme Court justice to use email. Think about that. In the 230-year history of the US Supreme Court, it took till 2010, 220 years before one used email. I realized we started using email regularly in a lot of organizations about 94, 95, but still, it's kind of surprising when you realize a lot of C-suite executives have no clue about what cybersecurity is. So tonight I was going to mention a few points from the book Well Aware. I've been reading this book. It's by a cybersecurity expert by the name of George Finney, who works at Southern Methodist University, and he teaches classes, but he also kind of runs their cyber area, their IT area. And he mentions a number of good things and basically habits for cybersecurity in terms of protecting your future. And David, please jump in if you have any comments you'd like to make while I'm talking about these. But let me just go through them fairly quickly, and then David and I will talk a little bit about anything that piques his interest, and then we can wrap up. first of all, he talks about kind of from a behavioral standpoint. So instead of functionally, even though functions are important, he's trying to get individuals in all organizations. Peter Drucker would call us executives. You know, if you have a role, whether you're in the mid-level, the upper level, you're in the C-suite, you're a senior executive, you're a mid-level executive, even if you're a low-level, entry-level, it's important, you know, for all of us to understand that cybersecurity is important. So talks about literacy, just becoming familiar with the lexicon of cybersecurity, making sure that that kind of framework is understood, ingrained in our minds, and understanding the cyber threats in an organization. You know, so getting everybody listening to podcasts, talking about, listening to these kind of webcasts, etc. You know, and developing literacy for learners so they can operate in the digital space and understand the technical applications. That leads to the second point. He says that there should be essentially a healthy skepticism that helps people understand and trust their judgment in terms of cybersecurity and building that cultural security. I'll come back to the term culture in a minute, but having both a belief in the cybersecurity systems that you operate in, but also having a little bit of skepticism about the process are important. Providing opportunities for computer users to learn and be skeptical. And we'll talk about in the next one, vigilance is number 3, about even things like phishing, you know, phishing. You've all heard about the phishing scam emails. This is something I think when you talk about vigilance, you know, you got to have a certain amount of skepticism, but also it has to be focused on detail. One of the things I've learned about being a dean, and I've learned about this as a teacher for many, many years, is that leaders, if you're at any level of the organization, you can't be so detail oriented that you aren't able to see the whole picture. And one of the things I've seen sitting in my role as a dean versus when I was a professor, it'd be no different if you're a director in an organization or you're sitting a little higher than mid-level, you're a vice president or assistant vice president, or you have a certain role over a series of operations. You have to be able to look at things generally and make judgments and analyze. But I always am impressed when people at that level can be detail people as well. Now, the problem with being a detail person, and David, you and I have talked about this a lot, is you can run into micromanagement, and then that bogs you down. We've all been guilty of that. You know, I know this COVID period, for example, has been very hard on me because I like to talk about strategy, thinking broadly, thinking 18 months, 36 months down the line for me and my team. But COVID has forced us to be intensely operational and intensely detailed on little things even. You know, what is this individual's work schedule going to be for the next 3 days? Because we don't know how the virus is going to be tracking from day to day in one county next to my county in Kentucky. So if it's tracking in one county across the river in Indiana, it's going to track differently here. And that's the kind of detail we're dealing with. So I feel like a 2 or 1-star general on the battlefield. I'm out there saying, okay, we have to build a trench here and now get ready to encounter the enemy 500 yards down the road. And now we've got to go build a trench somewhere else that gets us ready to fight in this direction. And that's what, instead of being able to be a 4 or 5-star general that's looking at the whole field, I'm stuck like this. And that's what vigilance, I think, is all about. And, you know, looking at the ability to lead down long, dense paths, and those can be deep and wide, but creating systems that can scan the horizon of cyberspace to identify threats, et cetera. It's very important, I think, that technology professionals know that, but also that the average employee in the company has something to say as well. David, do you have any thoughts as I'm moving forward here? I don't want to keep your creative insights from jumping out.
No, yeah, I mean, vigilance, I mean, what you're saying seems really important about the trench warfare. I can't help but think how this applies to organizational management as well. When you have a set of skills, right? And I think this is what, cybersecurity as a behavior is aimed at too. The younger generation might have more characteristics that align with this behavior, right? But it's the C-suite up top that are struggling a little bit understanding some of these behaviors, or skills as a behavior. And that is kind of where we're running into some issues here. And this is where vigilance, keeping the state of mind for keeping watch, right? So that when you do see something, you can be ready, recognize, act. That to me says, I have a company culture that supports itself on an organizational level from the top and the bottom. And so even though you're at the top looking at the trenches and stuff, you still have that support there. And so I think that's
that's a fantastic point, and that's a great segue to the fourth security kind of behavior that we need to think through, and that's secrecy. Which this is interesting because it seems like all cybersecurity is kind of rooted in secrecy. You don't want people or enemies or those who are trying to break in or hack into your system to know, the trade secrets or the codes or what have you. But it is important, and it's kind of a tenuous line, in terms of what should be secret and what shouldn't be secret. And I know, back to David's point about management, there's a certain element of, I was talking with my university president today, and we're talking about transparency and finances and other things. And there's some things that have to be kept secret. There are other things that need to be transparent. And oftentimes it's a very fine line. We may not want to tell everybody's salaries, but yet we have to talk about the amount of money that's being spent in total on certain things, like salaries. So people know that in general, in most organizations, you're going to spend 70% of all income on salaries. That's, if you want good people, you've got to be able to pay them what they're worth and keep them and retain them and all that. Well, I think in terms of cybersecurity, secrecy is interesting. And one of the things that Finney mentions is the great example in 2010 of WikiLeaks. And I remember following WikiLeaks pretty closely, and there's been some very interesting reports and documentaries and other things that have come out in the last 10, 11 years about WikiLeaks and the founder, Assange, and others that are tied into that process. But, it is interesting that it kind of takes a little bit of the veneer off, like state level secrecy. Because some people are there saying, well, some of the things that we learned about, who cares what the president of this company or the president of that nation ate for dinner, or what kind of clothes they were wearing or whatever. But on the other hand, it does lead to the question, of things like big tech surveillance and other kinds of issues that do concern the average Joe, who's basically put a lot of their debit cards, credit cards, other things, information in terms of e-commerce out there in cyberspace. So I think he says essentially managing effective control is part of this process of managing secrecy, and these are things we have to manage. I mentioned number 5, culture. I love the term. The management guru Peter Drucker, this is one of my favorite books, The Effective Executive, 1967. It's a great book. The number one upshot of that book, by the way, if you've ever read it, if you read it in business school, if you ever went to business school, is that if you don't manage your time, someone else is going to manage your time. That's literally the main takeaway from the book, although the book goes into more detail about different managing styles and different systems of how organizations are run, how organizations learn, and how leaders learn. But he says, Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's important to not only build a cybersecurity culture, but one that is not necessarily about fear, but one that's trying to be fairly transparent, but yet secure and safe, and providing incentives for the organization to be secure and stay within the parameters of a solid functioning organization and a non-dysfunctional organization. Number 6 is diligence. All organizations need to have a plan for their employees. I remember at my one of my employers, we did a lot of cybersecurity modules, especially on phishing, and people were getting dinged left and right in some of our training sessions. So that was important that we learned what that was. We've just had a massive breach in the state of Kentucky in the Department of Insurance, employment insurance. And that's been problematic for a lot of organizations. And they had to shut that department down for, I think, a week or so. And, you know, that's dangerous. I mean, when you're getting into that level of hacking taking place, but making sure that in terms of diligence, you can practice systemic or isolated computer failures and helping the organization grow. And so you're getting into things, and I'll come back to this term, but things like, David, you mentioned this in our discussions in the past, penetration testing and these kind of things into systems. A couple more here. I've got community number 7. And this is really moving toward cooperation, not competition, not looking at things in an organization as zero sum, but sharing of information. I think that's part of what's going to start to transpire. David's talk on Dogecoin is a great example that a little bit of this is democratization of ideas and democratization of activities.
I would argue too, it's the decentralization of ideas. Whenever you have all these people being able to operate independently, I think this is where we're kind of getting some of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's an even better way. That's even better because it is a decentralization. And my concern, David, and I think we could say it even about these currencies, is at what point was a big debate in political science for years, but at what point does the state or the world polity step back in, the governing apparatuses, and say we're re-centralizing?
Well, it's interesting you say that. We could have a whole nother conversation on this, but this is why we're seeing such high regulation around Bitcoin starting to become more and more implemented here in America now.
Yeah, and so one of the things Finney talks about is things like sharing intelligence, communication, protections, internal technology that you're wanting to have a community that understands this, and it may be inter-organizational, inter-operational, not just in terms of one organization, but it's important. And then number 8, he talks about mirroring, looking at the cybersecurity environment, again, being self-aware, self-critical. I use the term emotional intelligence as well, and being able to understand where your own vulnerabilities are as an organization. And again, you're back to reviewing the weaknesses and limitations of the system and trying to test for those problems. And then last, number 9, he talks about deception and using deception as a defensive posture. In a way, it seems old school. And if you're thinking about like intelligence agencies and others, CIA, NSA, the defense intelligence operations and multiple defense agencies that deal with intelligence in the United States and around the world, and militaries around the world. You know, this has been the kind of coin of the realm in some ways, no pun intended there with Dogecoin and the little doggy on the Dogecoin. But deception is something you're trying to throw hackers off, and you're trying to make sure you can do that in your own system. So you not only have planned, you know, double verification and triple verification in terms of, you know, IDs and passwords and this kind of stuff, but you're also doing regular kind of operations internally to try to make sure that if things seem unusual, there's a way to throw off external users who are coming into your system if they get by a firewall or something like that. So these are the 9 kind of approaches that George Finney lays out in his excellent 2020 book, Well Aware, Master the 9 Cybersecurity Habits to Protect Your Future. So David, this has been a great evening. I've enjoyed talking with you and hearing from you about Dogecoin. Any final thoughts in terms of how this all ties together and where all this leads to?
Well, I mean, if we're trying to tie it together moving forward for the future, I mean, cybersecurity as a behavior is critical. Everyone needs to just have these skills. You know, I say skills, but they're soft skills ingrained in them. So they're constantly aware, right? And it's especially critical for people who weren't born and raised with this technology to understand and try and implement it as best they can for themselves. So not only they, but their corporations and businesses are protected as well. And so this definitely applies to crypto. I mean, how many times do you hear about ICO scams? How many times do you hear about people breaking into wallets and stuff like that? I think in 2017 alone, there was something like $9.2 billion worth of crypto stolen. That was in 2017. That's a crazy number, right? So if we're investing in these social structures, which it seems like that's kind of the theme for tonight, it makes sense that we should develop a social skill set to help protect us as well. And that's, I think, where these nine facets really tie into the meme coin conversation.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's a great way to wrap it up. I think your point about decentralization as well is kind of the blessing and curse of the 21st century. That in a liberal individualistic society like the United States or some of the Western democracies, these kind of things are important. And the Dogecoin and the crypto as kind of a first gen blockchain technology are important for growth. But as you get into deeper development of the second gen or the third gen and beyond of the blockchain technology, the cybersecurity and the technology required to come alongside the development of the blockchain chain technology, which we'll probably cover. We'll start talking more about this in follow-up webinars and seminars that we're going to be giving around the blockchain and cybersecurity. I think will be a great thing. And I think
really interesting thing to cover outside. I mean, this definitely is from the blockchain for sure, but central bank digital currencies. I mean, that is the central bank's response to cryptocurrencies. And you talk about decentralization. Well, this is going to centralize something that's decentralized. So we'll get a lot of the same benefits, but we're definitely going to be under stricter surveillance. They're going to be able to control the flow of money a lot better. They're going to be able to track it better. So there's a lot of trade-offs, as a consumer, as a consumer of it. So yeah, we'll definitely have to cover those in some more sessions.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think the CBDC idea is, as I've said before to you, is near and dear to my heart because of studying the European Central Bank and even the Fed and other central banks and their roles in regulating currency and the kind of systems that we have in various Western and non-Western systems. But I do think we're going to have to talk about that because there are a number of things going on with, say, a cryptocurrency that are both reminiscent, in my very kind of basic economic discussion here, of things like bartering and baskets of currencies and things that on one hand seem fairly straightforward, but then when you go to actual physical money and currency and cash and things like that, you're getting into the kind of things that central banks want to regulate and control. And again, the beauty of the Dogecoin is that Elon Musk and David McDermott and Kurt Jefferson can go out and get all the Dogecoin we want and control it and trade it and whatever. And there's a limited supply and we can mine it. And it's a little different than the way the good old American greenback works or the euro works. And I think that is a fascinating discussion. I'll give you the last word, David, and you can sign us off. But before we do that, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We're right at around 9 o'clock Eastern time, 8 o'clock Central time in the United States. And I want to also say that we will be putting a number of our sessions and seminars up on a forthcoming website from an organization called Princeton Hive out of Princeton, New Jersey, which is developing 21st century skills for 21st century citizens in global time and space. And we're excited to be working with Princeton Hive. So David, why don't you wrap us up?
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining us this time. I'm glad we got to talk about Dogecoin and cybersecurity as a behavior. We hope to see you guys next time. Thank you.
Thank you.